Thank you, everyone. I'm going to start with the latest COVID numbers. In Massachusetts, as of yesterday, total case 110,137. It's an increase of 163 from the previous days. The state has now confirmed 8,198 deaths. That's up 15. I apologize if anyone on the TV is getting background noise. We have a construction project happening outside. The Boston numbers as of today, we recorded 13,578 cases. That's an increase of 22 cases. 9,568 people have fully recovered, an increase of 64. 710 people have passed away, and we didn't have any new deaths today. Our prayers continue to go out to the families, to all those who are struggling with this illness and the families who lost loved ones. Phase 3 of the statewide reopening started yesterday. I want to remind everyone that in Boston, Phase 3 begins next Monday, July 13th. We asked for the extra week because Boston has unique needs and the amount of people that live in our city and actually work in our city, stemming from the density and population, our workforce, commercial and cultural sectors. I want to appreciate the work of the governor and also the advisory board that were flexible in recognizing these concerns that we had here in Boston. We're developing additional guidelines and supports that take time to implement correctly here in Boston. We're continuing to monitor our local health data and watch for any impacts that we may see from Phase 2. Taking extra time also allows us the opportunity to continue addressing the racial and ethnic inequalities that we're seeing here and the health impacts and the economic impacts of this virus. Today I have some updates on our preparedness for Phase 3 and the work that we're doing to help individuals and small businesses move forward as safely as possible. One of the things that we're able to do with the extra time is we took in Phase 1 and 2 was develop very detailed guidelines for industries like construction, for office space, and for houses of worship. For Phase 3, we're developing guidelines as well in multiple languages for indoor fitness, museums and cultural spaces, and outdoor events. We'll also be hosting online workshops for indoor and outdoor events, performance venues in arts and culture, and tours and activities in the tourism industry. We'll begin posting material by the end of this week as we move forward. I'm also going to provide some updates on some of the work that we're doing to support small businesses during both the closure and the recovery periods of COVID-19. I want to first say a word about the purpose of the relief funds. We have been confronting 3 crises here at the same time in the city of Boston: a health crisis and COVID-19 pandemic, and economic impacts of this pandemic, and the ongoing impacts of systemic racism. Our response has been collaborative, comprehensive, and equity-driven, and we prioritize meeting the most urgent needs of the vulnerable residents and our small businesses in our city. So our relief and resiliency funds have been part of a broader strategy, and they have played a very essential role here in the city. They're supporting COVID testing at community health centers all across the neighborhoods. They're helping thousands of families make their rent payments. They're helping thousands of small businesses recover and open safely here in Boston. They have brought food and care to our seniors who have been isolated by this virus, and families who are in quarantine. These funds are emergency responses to a life-threatening situation, and they have absolutely saved lives. I am proud of how our city has come together to support the vulnerable residents and businesses all across Boston. I'm grateful for both our emergency budget resources and our resiliency fund donors. We are committed to building on this work through our recovery to create a more equitable community. Just a small example, our Small Business Relief Fund has now given over $6.1 million to nearly 1,700 businesses across every neighborhood in the city of Boston. 50% of those businesses are owned by people of color. They're in industries most affected by COVID, including restaurants and small retail stores, hair and nail salons, child care and personal care. In addition to the Reopen Boston Fund has gotten $1.5 million out to 800 different businesses with 15 or fewer employees. These are grants for PPE, cleaning products, construction material for a safe reopening. That fund is still taking applications. We're asking people to go to boston.gov/reopening. We also have new supports for restaurants and their customers that I can share today. Since outdoor dining began, we have granted over 300 restaurants a temporary license to provide on-street dining. In that time, the Commission for Persons with Disabilities have been working with other city departments to ensure that new eating spaces are accessible and the paths of travel on the sidewalks are not obstructed. To increase access, we are now providing restaurants with portable mobility ramps. If your restaurant's permitted for outdoor dining, you can request a portable ramp by emailing ada@boston.gov. That's ada@boston.gov. Ramps are already being provided on a rolling basis, along with a toolkit with information on setting them up, a sign with information that restaurants can hang up, and best practices on providing the service to people with disabilities. I want to give a special shout out to Commissioner Krista McGosh and her team for leading this work and doing some amazing work here in the city of Boston. They are unsung heroes in our city, always looking out for the needs of disability community and making sure their concerns are part of all of our planning here in Boston. They make us stronger and more inclusive as a community. Later this month, we're going to be celebrating the 30th anniversary of the signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act, a truly groundbreaking piece of legislation that changed our country for the better. It takes vigilance, investments, and advocacy to implement that law, and that's what we are committed to doing with the support and guidance of the community. It's also important to know that many members of our disability community have medical vulnerabilities. They are risk factors for COVID-19 illness. If you are out and not wearing a mask or not properly distancing, you are sending a message to many people that area may not be safe for them. That means fewer places that people can go for fresh air or mental health breaks. And that's inequity. So I ask everyone again about the impacts of your actions and what they have on other people. As I've said, we are seeing disturbing numbers in many parts of the country right now, still continuing over the last weekend that we just experienced. This is not time for us to let up here in Boston or Massachusetts, either in our collective risk management or our personal precautions. So I'm going to keep repeating these steps for as long as it takes, and we're going to keep doing all of them as long as it takes and for however long we do it. We're asking people to continue to wear a mask when you're outside your home. We're asking people to maintain 6 feet of distance, space from other people. We're asking you to stay away from crowds or gatherings where physical distancing is not possible. We're asking you to wash your hands as often with warm water and soap and wipe down surfaces and disinfect those surfaces. We need everyone to be focused on what they can do. You have made a big impact here in the city of Boston on a daily basis by doing all of this. So we're also asking you to continue to do that. Government also has a responsibility, and we're working every day to meet that responsibility with science-based decisions, clear information, and the material relief for those people who need it. Businesses and nonprofits also have a responsibility to follow the guidelines and manage the risks for all of your workspaces and your employees who are coming back to work. Individuals have a responsibility to follow the guidelines as well and look out for the most vulnerable. If we each play our part, we will move safely and successfully forward. I just want to address a couple more things, and then I'm going to ask the Commissioner to come up, Commissioner Gross, to come up and talk a little bit about the Boston Police Department and this weekend in Boston. This weekend in Boston, over the 4th of July, we had several acts of violence. Every act of violence certainly causes waves of lasting trauma throughout a community. Every loss of life is heartbreaking for every single victim and for their families. And when you see a 15-year-old boy or you hear a 15-year-old boy lose his life, it hits home even harder how senseless these acts of violence and these impacts truly are. I'm going to ask the Commissioner to come up and talk briefly about the weekend, and then I'll finish up and take questions.
Thank you, Ron. Good afternoon, everyone. So it's been a very trying week that led into the 4th of July weekend. There were several acts of violence. I think we experienced 7 homicides within 7 days, 5 by means of firearm, 2 were stabbing victims. But through that all, I am here to tell you that the community really did help us. Besides the 7 homicides, we also had several shootings, and the community called us, helped us with the investigations. Community also called us when they witnessed people with firearms. So in those 7 days, we made several firearms arrests, responded to several acts of violence. But I want you to know, I can't thank the community enough for stepping forward. Out of the 7 homicides, 2 were immediately solved because of the community. The community that's saying we've had enough. A community that's saying the life of a 15-year-old boy should not be taken at such an early age. So I want you to know that the neighborhoods of Boston, again, are not desensitized to violence. They did their part in helping the police arrest dangerous persons or help to facilitate the investigations that are still ongoing. This is the type of teamwork that we need going forward. Not only the community, Boston Public Health Commission, Commissioner Morales, Boston Center for Youth and Families, and I can't thank enough the Boston Neighborhood Trauma Team that was out there for each and every call, as well as our street workers and violence interrupters. This is what we're talking about, folks, because still, if you compare Boston to other major metropolises, 1 homicide is too many, but what we experienced here in 1 week is what other major metropolises are experiencing almost every day. So I'm not coming up here with a message of gloom and doom. I'm coming up here with a message of hope that if we continue to work together like we did over the last 7 days, that we will be successful in holding violent persons accountable, and we will be successful in saving lives. So the BPD is still committed to working with the district attorney, transit police, state, local, and federal. Anything it takes to make sure our city stays safe. Thank you.
I want to thank the Commissioner and his work over the weekends. There was also lots of fireworks in Boston this weekend, regardless of all the calls from a lot of people asking people to not shoot off fireworks. I was on a call this morning with the Fire Commissioner, and there were several little fires in the city of Boston. Couldn't confirm that they were a result of fireworks, but we're asking people to be careful. It's a big inconvenience for senior citizens, for children, for babies, for folks experiencing PTSD, for pets. Our housing stock in Boston is old, and we're asking people that shooting fireworks off could cause fires and problems. Certainly, we're going to be out continuing to confiscate fireworks as we move forward here. We're asking people to check your basements to see if your kids might have fireworks in the house. That's a dangerous thing as well. They can explode. We received several calls this weekend on it that, quite honestly, almost overload our system. So we're asking people as we move forward here in the next couple of days here to continue to call 911 if you're hearing fireworks go off. The police are out there. Many of these fireworks are being lit off in a park. They're being lit off in secluded areas, so when the police goes to the location, sometimes people hear them coming or see them coming and they take off. So we just want to continue to talk about that as well. Just to follow up a little bit on what the Commissioner said, violence will never be accepted as normal in Boston. We cannot rest until we eliminate it from our city, and we have not wavered on that belief, quite honestly, and we're going to continue to move forward on it. We're going to continue to working at the root cause to keep young people engaged, adults as many opportunities as possible. This summer, we have summer jobs that we started up yesterday, actually. We have learning opportunities, enrichment, mentoring, second chance programs. We're also working on a limited basis with our summer camps. We have opened, we're going to continue to, our applications right now are open for summer jobs so young people can still apply. We're seeing a national uptake in violence across many cities in America. I want everyone to understand that in Boston, the Commissioner talked a little bit about this, we're leading with a coordinated focus on outreach, prevention, and services. This weekend, our street worker program, our SOAR teams, were out there in the streets in the neighborhoods. Our counselors on the neighborhood trauma teams, our Office of Public Safety, the Bureau of Community Engagement with the Boston Police Department, all of our community partners this weekend were out working hard all across the city of Boston. I want to thank them for that. They are definitely having a positive impact, and we believe they've prevented a lot more further violence on the city streets. This is a coordinated effort, connected and intervened using cycles, trauma teams to end the cycles of violence. So if you have an impacted neighborhood and you're contacted by a member of this team, we want you to make sure that you work with them as they continue to move forward. Anyone who is concerned about if you see something in your community and you saw an act of violence in your neighborhood that might not have been a shooting or a homicide, but you're concerned about the young people there, you can reach out to our neighborhood trauma teams at 617-431-0125 or call 311, and we will send the team out to talk to people in the community that might need the help. People have options. Your lives are valued, and our city wants to help you. So with that, I'll open up to any questions that any press here has. Yeah, the question is on tourism. Next week, the duck boats, a lot of the tourism comes back, or the venues come back. Doesn't necessarily mean the tourists come back. I think that in Boston we're still a bit away before we see it, that booming, thriving tourism industry here in the city of Boston. Unfortunately, with COVID-19, a lot of people still aren't traveling. My office overlooks Faneuil Hall. I'm not seeing the countless numbers of people that have been out there in the years past. I'm seeing more today than I did over the last 4 months, but I still think, unfortunately, our restaurants, our hotels, and our tourism industry is in for a bit more of a ride here, especially when you see these other states opening up and the numbers of COVID cases happening. That's not sending a strong message across the country that cities are open for business right now. But I do think it's very important that as we continue to move forward here, continue to take the precautions, keep our numbers low. We could be the first city that truly recovers from COVID-19, and people, when they start to travel again, come to Boston because our numbers are so low. So there's a lot to say to keeping keeping our numbers down.
Mayor, two questions. The first one for both of you. Obviously there have been all the calls, as you know, to keep on the police, pushing back on the police budget. Does the violence, the way that everyone came together this weekend, is there a message in there for the activists and politics involved?
I don't know if there's a message in there. I just know that I had a conversation with the commissioner yesterday. We are going to be having a meeting this week about where $12 million is going to come out of the budget. A lot of the overtime that is spent in the Boston Police Department is adding extra resources in the neighborhood, such as the fireworks or even the parades. Unfortunately, the protests this year took a lot of the overtime budget that was allocated for this year moving forward. So the commissioner, obviously, I don't want to speak for him, but has some work to do in finding out where that $12 million can come from. But there are certain specialty units that we have in the city of Boston. We're going to have to revisit them to see if the police are going to have to revisit them to see where they can make cuts. I mean, $12 million cut's a cut. So if you cut $12 million out of any budget, that's a cut, and that means that you have to come up with these places. So we'll see as we move forward here.
Does what happened this weekend maybe argue against cutting anything?
Well, I think that it makes a good argument. That, one thing about, I think that there was calls to defund the police in a bigger way, and we received thousands of phone calls on a weekly basis to 911. Defunding the police is not the answer. And I think that in Boston, we have stepped up in more ways than one in 2014 and 15. We joined President Obama in reforming police tactics across the country here in Boston. And in this particular case here, after George Floyd was murdered, we signed on, and the commissioner immediately made adjustments to the 8 can't wait. We have a task force right now looking at policing, and they're going to come back with some recommendations, and I don't see any reason why we wouldn't be supportive of these recommendations. I know that the Boston, I'm going to have the commissioner come up and talk about community policing model. Boston is a leader in the country for community policing, and I think that rather than, defunding is not the answer, quite honestly, to the police department. It's about reforming. When we hear about these stories of happening in other cities around America, I'm praying it doesn't happen here, but it doesn't happen in Boston right now. That doesn't mean that we don't stay very diligent on continuing reforming and training our officers, year after year. That's something we have to do, but we are a model for community policing. I'm going to ask the commissioner to talk a little bit about that.
In regards to overtime, the mayor's right. We do have work to do. But it wasn't just like we were senselessly spending money. $2.27 million went to coverage for Mass Ave and Melnia Cass. Almost $3 million for COVID-19, because Boston police officers are not robotic. We're human too, and we suffered tremendous losses, including Officer Jose Fontanez, and all of the protests. $3+ million for that as well. So, this was done in protection of the city. But can we make cuts in other places? Of course. And I'm hoping that the funds used, that were taken, are going to be used towards programs and initiatives that will enhance our community policing model, which is one of the top models in the country. You have a standalone Bureau of Community Engagement. And I don't even have to tout that. You've seen us out there. Each and every day, we are out there. Our community policing model includes 11 community service offices. We have great programs like Youth Connect. How many people know that we have licensed clinical social workers in our areas that are considered the most violent? That's showing that we're not interested in putting on cuffs unless necessary, but we're interested in changing lifestyles of the individuals that are violent or at risk of becoming gang members, and working with them and their families to provide them with resources or educate them about what's available. That's why you experienced a 20-year low last year in crime, because of community policing. And let me be clear about it. You have to know the definition of community policing. That's exactly what it means, community. So it's the clergy, it's the community, it's institutions of higher learning that have us look at things through a different lens. It's our great medical facilities. Even our businessmen and philanthropists help us benefit from their great philanthropic endeavors by giving money to our programs and initiatives. And last but not least, even our professional sports teams come through. The Patriots, the Red Sox, the Bruins, the Celtics are all in our communities and all showing the way of what it takes for this village to come together and make sure that everybody is having a good quality of life. So this village concept means that the onus isn't solely on the police department, but we all have work to do. So any funds we're talking about that are defunded or diverted, I hope they're going into the programs that will help relieve the Boston Police from wearing many, many, many hats, too many. And so looking forward to working with everyone. We'll work on the budget where we can, but we will never, ever jeopardize the safety of our communities. If we need officers there, they will be there. We'll articulate why that's an overtime expenditure. Thank you. No, because of the amount of protests we have. Right? And trust me, I'm a First Amendment rights guy. There were many peaceful protesters, but then there were ones who were hell-bent on pushing their own agenda that aren't even worthy of me mentioning their anarchist names. That caused several officers to be injured, in which I had to replace. It caused damage to the city, and we had to cover people exercising their First Amendment rights. So any and all protests, let's keep this in mind, folks. Any and all protests, we're protecting the protesters as well. because there are people that don't want to see people exercise their First Amendment rights, especially when we talk about diversity, inclusion, and racial equity. So we have to watch two sides all the time, and we have to be there in all of the protests to ensure that everyone's afforded their First Amendment rights. And just like the 4th of July, I had a full call-up. So unfortunately, a lot of that's on overtime, but safety is paramount.
Mayor.
Let me just real quickly to Commissioner Chu. I mean, when we made the cancellations of all the parades and stuff earlier in the year, beginning of summer, you know, we also looked at our budget and knew that there'd be some adjustments made to the budget because we were canceling all the festivals and the parades. Clearly, we don't have sports teams playing, so at the time there was no, you know, no concern, I guess use the word concern, of its championship parade at that point. So you know, so the budget was cut less from last year, and then on top of that, it's $12 million cut. So I mean, we'll see as we move forward here. Hopefully crime stays low in the city, and hopefully that we don't have to have extra police officers on because of crime.
Councilors, there are a few councilors that are pushing for more council control over both the police budget and the city budget as a whole. Do you view this as usurping kind of the executive power of the mayor's office?
No, I mean, right now the council has the ability. The biggest piece of legislation in front of them every year is the budget. There's a whole process that the council goes through, community process with community hearings and meetings. They have several votes on the budget. The first budget historically has always been to reject the budget that's been put in front of them. And the reason for that is that we're able to go back and adjust. That's my first budget we put across. That's the process. When I was a legislator at the State House, my process is the same as their process here in the City Council. We had hearings on the budget, we had input in the budget, we voted on the budget. At the end of the day, it's the up or down vote, yes or no vote. It's pretty much, there's some differences at the state level, but that's your job as a legislator. And also with city contracts, you know, you can't go, that's not the role of the Boston City Council. The role of the City Council is to certainly up and down vote when it comes to finalizing the contract, but under my administration, since I've been mayor, I've had a very open, transparent process, and several times I've asked people to come to the table with me and help me and work on different things, and I'm going to continue that spirit of collaboration. I mean, I was never one to think that you don't collaborate in government. When I was a state rep, I felt it was important that the governor collaborates with us and the speaker and the Senate president, and they feel the same way today as mayor of the city. I understand the importance of their role. They get elected just like I do. They put their name on the ballot just like I do. And there's a process. All right, thank you.
Thank you.